I worked for Trivantage. I was a fabricator for 20 years, and I'm going to show you all how to make a laceless T-top. Some people call them banded T-tops. This is one way to approach this, or one way to do it. There's a lot of different ways to do this, just like every other piece of canvas out there. I would never tell you that this is the best way, or the only way, or the fastest way. It's just one way that I learned how to do it. I was self-taught. I went and looked at other people's jobs and sort of reverse engineered it and came up with this method. There's other styles and other ways to do it. The advantage to a banded or a laceless T-top is obviously you don't have any lacing cord. It looks much cleaner. When you get done, it looks like a fiberglass top without the weight or the expense of fiberglass. You can retrofit an old or existing T-top frame, or you can start with a new one like this. Thanks to Tim for donating his time and materials to build this for us. So basically what you're going to do is stretch a piece of fabric over it and fasten it mechanically instead of with lacing cord and grommets. I recommend several things in a piece of fabric. I will tell you that this fabric is truck tarp material. It's not well suited for for a T-top. I chose truck tarp material because we have Sombrella, Ferrari, and Herculite represented here, and we appreciate them coming. They all have fabrics that would be suitable for this. Certainly something like the Stamoid Open with its heaviness and its width would be ideal for a situation like this. The Riviera is a really good option. It's got a really nice finish and hand to it. It's got a little more stretch. I think that the Herculite Excel would be a great product also. Sombrella is one of the products that I would not necessarily recommend for this application, because when you trim it off, you don't want something that's going to be frayed. So I would not recommend Sombrella, but the Sombrella Supreme, C-Mark, those would be good options also. If you're using something that's real heavy, a nice thick heavy material, I think you can do it with no reinforcements. If you have to use a thinner, lighter weight material, then you may want to put a double reinforcement where your fastener can go. That's going to have to be determined by the job. So another advantage to this, along with the cleanliness of it and just the look, is the fact that you can actually go out, send one guy or two guys out to a job, fabricate this on site with one trick. There's no pattern, go back to the shop, cut it, sew it, bind it, put grommets in it, and then send a guy back out to install it. That's a full day project. One guy can go out and build and install this thing, collect a check within a matter of a couple hours. And I'm going to show you kind of how to do that. So you guys feel free to sit where you're at. If you want to get a little closer or come up and help or whatever, you can do that too. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to start with this is a piece of hollow back 3/4 inch aluminum rub rail. You can buy it from a variety of different places. Land and Sea is a distributor, at least in my area. I don't know if they're up here. A lot of different metal distributors. Trivantage does not offer this yet.
Yep.
We may someday. So it's real easy to work with. It comes in 12-foot lengths. It comes pre-drilled, pre-countersunk. So what I do is I just find the center of it. Okay. Everybody knows how to find the center by gravity. So I find the center, and I've already pre-drilled this frame just to make it go a little faster. I'm also using a square drive screw. And one of the reasons that I'm doing that is that you can kind of preload your screw. When I've done this before, it's helpful to have somebody to help you. If you have a helper, because they can kind of load the screws for you and hand them up to you. I would strongly recommend putting a bedding compound on the screw. That's going to do two things. This is Lanacoat. You can buy it at West Marine, various other places. Soon to be at Trivantage. Two things that the bedding compound does: it lubricates the screw so it goes in easier, and more importantly, it prevents the dissimilar metal corrosion that you get from the stainless and the aluminum being welded together. Somebody had asked what happens if you have to replace this. Is it hard to get the screws out? And the answer is yes, if they weren't treated properly. If you put a raw stainless steel screw into a raw aluminum, you give it a few months in salt water, you're going to have corrosion build up there. It can be detrimental if this is powder coated. If it's not powder coated, you go to replace it. 2 years later, the screw heads are going to snap off, every one of them. Then you have to drill out, re-drill, relocate the screw holes, something like that. But if you'll just take a minute and just dip that screw into a bedding compound, you'll find that, like I said, not only does it go in and work easier, but the next person that has to replace this top will thank you for it, and it might be you. So that brings up another point. A disadvantage to doing this type of a top is that there's no repair. So if you get all done and the electronic guy that goes out to put the radar dome back in the center and he drops a screwdriver and it goes through it, you got to start over. You got to go back out and take it all off, new fabric, etc. You can't unlace it, sew a patch on it, or repair and put it back on. Because once you trim it off, there's just nothing else no other option. So let's start in the center. Like I said, I've already pre-drilled my hole in there. Okay. This stuff is real easy to work with because it's real soft.
If you got all your holes pre-drilled, why are you screwing this on?
I'm going to show you how to get those holes drilled. I'm going to act as if these holes weren't drilled. Okay. So what you do, like I said, you find the center, you hold it up there, you drill a hole, and then you just kind of start clamping, just loosely. When you get to the corners, you just pull it and bend it around. It's just that easy. Just kind of form it as you go. Get back here to the back. Obviously this is a small top, one piece does it. Typically you'd have two pieces. Find a place where you want to join them, either on the sides. If you got rocket launchers in the back, you can join them there. You can join it in the center. It's up to you. To cut it, I just use these real big, heavy tin snips. You could also use a hacksaw if you wanted. But for me, I just cut through it with the tin snips, take a file and follow the sharp edges down. Once you've got it on here and located, then you're going to drill all your holes. Okay. So now you've got the trim on. It's all the holes are drilled. Everything's ready to go. You're going to loosen your clamps. Typically, when I'm drilling the holes, I would drill a few. I'd run a screw in, drill a few more, run a screw in, so that you make sure that everything's going. All those holes will line up exactly. I wouldn't want to start drilling, and not run a screw in every so often just to make sure that you've got it in the right location. Okay, so now you're left with your ring. Just set it down somewhere, move it off to the side. Again, as long as you're using a heavy enough material that doesn't require any reinforcements, just roll it out on there, cut it a little bit large, put a few clamps on it. What you're really trying to do right now is just kind of hold it in place and make sure that you've got enough hanging off the sides to grab a hold of it. Okay, once you got the fabric clamped on there, you put the ring back in place. I forgot to mention, but when you take this off, you mark it. Up, back, front, something, so that you can ensure that you're getting it back in the same spot. These holes are all drilled in this extrusion by machine, so they should be pretty accurate, but you never know. Can I get you to give me a hand? Just hold that edge right there. Flop. So I know, I marked it where the center was, so I know where I'm starting. I'm basically just going to take my front clamp off and clamp it around the trim. Again, I'm not really that concerned at this point with how tight I have this fabric. I just want to make sure that I've got it in the right position. Okay, I got it. Thank you. So now I'm using these same clamps that are holding the fabric. They're also holding this piece of trim up also. So I always carried these long upholstery pins with me. Go down and kind of see where that hole is and find that hole through the fabric. I got the front screw in. Now this thing is held in place there. At that point, then I would go and put a little bit more tension on the fabric and start to kind of pull it around and make sure that you've got it pulled pretty tight. Another way to do this, and what a lot of guys will do, is they'll leave this fabric even longer, and they'll cut holes in it every so often, and they'll put ropes through those holes and tie it back to itself, and almost lace it underneath the T-top, sort of like a spider web underneath there. And then what they're doing is they're pulling it tight first, and then everything's in place. Then they just walk around with a screw gun and put the trim on. It's just a different way of doing it. Like I said, my opinion is there's no right way or wrong way. Just different ways. So I've got it clamped on here, and it's not real tight yet, but it's getting there, okay? Like I said, this truck tarp material is not really ideal, but it'll work for this thing. Once you get a couple of screws in, then I like to work opposite. I like to work front and back if possible. Now where you have to tension. And to tension it, I use these flat build pliers. These came from Harbor Freight. They're sheet metal pliers. You can also get them that have the vice grip locks to them. Depends on what you prefer. What you can do is you're grabbing a hold of the fabric and wrapping it around the pipe like that, just pulling it super tight. So if you were starting with two pieces, which typically you would, when you join them on the side, you start in the front, you pull it around, pull it real tight, and then start in the back with your second piece, and then kind of work to the sides. Because I'm working with one piece, I don't really have that option, because until I get this whole thing screwed down, none of my holes are going to really line up. So I'm just going to have to work my way around the side here, so that I kind of show you how it's going to work. Naturally, most of the time this is going to be up overhead. You might have to use a ladder or something. By sticking that pin through, you can kind of locate where that hole is in the frame. It gives you something to aim for with your screw when you're going in. A lot of times on the corners, these are like 6 inches on center, the holes are drilled. A lot of times in the corners, you might add an extra one here just because you want to make sure that it's going to hold it down properly. Anybody out there ever done a banded T-top?
Yes. Years
You
ago.
have?
We've been doing years ago with South Florida one time.
And do you use a method like this, or do you tie it on?
No, he does more like this.
So,
It's a lot harder on the big boats though. When you're doing a 50-footer,
oh yeah.
it's a lot more difficult.
So basically what you're going to do is just then continue that same method around. Like I said, if you have the opportunity to start front and back and work opposite, I think it's easier and I think it's better. When you get into the corners, you're basically just going to pull it with those pliers, pull it around.
What's the name of the pliers?
I always call them duckbill pliers, but I think they're called sheet metal pliers. So we talked about the screws some. I told you these are square drive screws. They're what's called trim heads. They got a real small, narrow head on them. It fits right into that recess real nice so they don't stick out. So that's one advantage to them. The other advantage is the fact that they're square drive. You can stick it on in one-handed, and just hold it on there. And when you do have to replace it 2 years down the road because they tore it up, or 10 years down the road because they're tired of the color, you have a pretty good chance of getting those screws back out if you've used the bedding compound and because the fact that it's square drive. So I'm just going to show you. I'm not going to go ahead and put this whole thing on right now, but just to show you, it's pretty tight already. I've only got a few screws in it. Once it's done, you just take a razor blade.
Does Weller comes out with this little, like a little hot thing by that it uses roof like it's hot. That way. Like I'm seriously $2.
I always finish it up with a beer
I
coffee
understand, I'm just saying you could do something like we use.
because I just think it looks nicer. Number one, it makes it look nicer. I think it probably adds a little bit to the strength. But most importantly, you're sealing this top edge where all that water is running off this, the front of this thing, and it's running right down in there. If you don't seal it, you'll get a bunch of mildew down in there. But if you seal it up with silicone, you're basically making a waterproof seal in there. And it'll prevent to have, all that mildew growth that's inside there. And then if you come down on the bottom side and put a little bit of silicone in there too, you'll cover up that cut edge so you don't see it from underneath. That's pretty much it.